Welcome to the King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm here with author and mentor Doug Lawrence. How you doing today, Doug?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Appreciate you for investing the time and energy to be on the show today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, you have a very interesting bio and background. I'm definitely looking forward to getting to the discussion. But before we get started, one of the questions I want to ask is, what would you say your spiritual energy level is? And what I mean by that question is, from a number ranging from 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where would you say you kind of fall into that spectrum right now?
That's a good question. I'm going to say probably around 8.
Okay. Okay, excellent, excellent. And the reason I ask that question is because when I have meetings or when I have given my presentations, I'm a firm believer when, Einstein says that everything is energy and energy is everything, that if I get people who are 2s or 3s, then it's not going to be a productive meeting. People are not going to be engaged. They're not going to be present. And when I get folks who are 7 or 10, then to me, that's when the miracles can happen because people are going to be present. They're going to be more engaged. So thank you for indulging me with that question.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. It causes me to do some reflection anyhow, so that's a good thing.
Great, great. So as we get started, one of my first questions I really love to ask people, especially folks who are doing things that are, as Carl Jung talks about, at the statesman level, where you're doing things bigger than yourself, that's for the betterment of others. So with that being said, what do you see as your purpose in life?
So I tie that back to I did a session with a hypnotherapist, a past life regression, and what came out in that was that in all my past lives that we visited, that I was a healer. And so when I look at where I am today, my purpose in life is to be just that, to be that healer, to be that person who wants to be able to work with other people to help them be the best that they can be, to help them grow on a personal and a professional level. And, for that matter, too, to be able to do much the same thing for organizations. But I think that my general sense of purpose is more focused on the individual than it is on the organization itself.
Understood. Understood. Now, I'm a part of this conscious community movement, conscious capitalism, conscious leadership, and people often use those terms conscious in different definitions. So I always like to ask people, how do they define being a conscious leader? So how would you define being a conscious leader?
The very easiest or simplest definition, and it's one that I have it's been part of my mantra as I've gone through my career and stuff like that, but it's all about me versus we. So the idea of it's all about me, I don't care much about others, so on and so forth down that path, versus more of a collaborative approach where we look at things from the aspect of what can we do? And it fits quite nicely with the mentoring processes and concepts that I work with on a daily basis, where, it's not so much about me doing this or me doing that. It's what are we? And if I can collaboratively frame things, we get better results when we do just that. So a conscious leader to me would be somebody who obviously is guiding others, but also at the same time is very much aware of themselves and what's going on inside. I always suggest or tell people that from a mentoring perspective, which is similar to leadership, is that you can't mentor or you can't lead unless you're whole yourself. So if you haven't figured out how to do that, then that's our first step. Is we need to sort of go through have some conversations where we talk about, the whole aspect of what it takes to be a conscious leader and the aspect of how we have to be whole as a person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say you're most grateful for?
The thing I'm most grateful for was the opportunity to spend as much time as I was given with my wife. My wife passed away in February of 2021 from cancer, and we still had lots of time that we could have done some really great things together, and that's not the case.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
My condolences definitely goes out to you for that. Now, as we kind of shift more into your business and some of your writings, I'm curious, what is the mission of the international mentoring community? And then also, kind of a two-part question: what inspired you to create the international mentoring community?
So the mission of the international mentoring community is to further the practice of mentoring, to help individuals to create that deeper, richer mentoring experience. That's number one. Number two is to be able to create, and which the international mentoring community is today, is the independent body for the certification of mentors. So, and the reason why that's significant is that there is an independent body, the International Coaching Federation, that certifies coaches and that, but nowhere along that whole path is there anything said or done with mentoring. And so back in 2009, I had this vision that I needed to create this independent body for mentor certification and to work with people to help them go through that process. And we started that journey initially focusing on certification from a knowledge perspective, and then shifting to one more so of a competence basis. And now we've kind of moved it to one that's more of a practice basis, so the actual practice of mentoring. So that's the mission and kind of the direction. It was actually a vision, and it was ironically, I was job coaching university students, helping them get interviewed and get hired. And then what would happen is they would encounter something in the workforce they didn't know how to deal with. So they'd come to me and they'd say, how do we deal with this? And at that time point, I didn't know what I was doing as far as what it was called, but it was actually mentoring. So I would ask a bunch of questions, guide them to the answers. And they said, you should do this for a living. We can't afford to pay you, but I'm sure somebody could. And so I did my market research and stuff, and I found that there was a place for an organization such as the International Mentoring Community that could do all of that stuff, provide the certification, could help create the path for where mentoring needed to go, and be able to work with people to help them do just that.
Yeah, and that brings up a good question. And a lot of people may not know the difference between the roles of a coach, a mentor, and maybe an advisor. Can you kind of speak to that as far as what the differences are?
I can certainly do that. I will try to keep it as simple as I possibly can, because even I get confused sometimes as to what's the difference. But really, for me, what the difference is a coach is somebody that an organization would bring in to deal with some performance-related issues. So they would work with an employee that they're having difficulties with, and the coaching is very structured. It's very definitive as far as what the outcomes are. Mentoring, on the other hand, is very relationship based. Not saying coaching isn't, but mentoring, from all the experiences I've had with mentoring, is that it's very deep in the relationship aspect. And typically the mentee, the person you're working with, sort of drives the bus, as I call it. They decide which direction we're going to go and how we're going to get there and all that. And my job as the mentor is to kind of be the guide. I'm going to ask questions to help guide us where we need to go, and and then it's up to, the person that I'm mentoring or the mentee. It's up to them to start to think their way through some of this stuff and be able to start moving forward.
So, does mentoring require mentees to be of certain ages or certain uh, experience levels in order to have a mentor?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm a It's the same thing when you take a look at mentoring. So a lot of people say, well, you can't come and mentor in our organization because you don't have industry experience. Industry experience is a nice to have, not a need to have. So I do a lot of work in organizations that I don't have any experience whatsoever. And age is, I learn a lot from my grandkids. And that really is, when you think of it, that's kind of mentoring in its purest form, where, I learned something from my grandson here just the other day, where, he popped up on the couch, sat down beside me with um, his book that he wanted me to take a look at and go through it with him. And, that was the first time we've bonded like that particular, because he's always playing with his trains and all his miniature toys and all that sort of stuff. But here was a opportunity for us to actually get bond together. And then I said, we should do this again. And he said, well, when are you coming back, Grandpa? When are you coming back to see me? And we'll sit down and we'll go through the start reading through that particular book a little bit more often. So you can, a mentor can be of any age. Age is not a factor.
I've heard an expression, they say that kids are our future teachers, that you're going to learn a lot, and then they come to the world with a lot of information as well. So to that point, my next question would be, why is mentoring so important to you?
I've experienced the gift of mentoring, and I've seen what it can do for me as an individual. It's in a lot of, I guess, in a lot of cases, it's been instrumental. Mentoring by itself has been instrumental in helping me deal with some of the demons that I've had in my closet, as far as post-traumatic stress and my behaviors and stuff that came as a result of that. I guess I would have to say that those would be, primarily a lot of the things that I was dealing with were things that mentoring and being able to find a good mentor, that those were things that helped me move along and started to recognize the value that mentoring could actually bring. And then fast forward to where I am today, where I've experienced it from the mentor's perspective, and I'm going, now I understand why it's so important to me. Why? Because I'm seeing the difference it actually makes in other people, setting aside what it's done for me, but looking at it from the aspect of what it's done for other people, and sort of the change in their life as a result of mentoring being a part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't think of anybody who I admire who's successful, whether it's career, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, who haven't had great mentors to help them get to where they are. Not one single person can say, I was able to get here just off my own hard work and straight discipline and will. There's someone that guided them and helped them along that journey. And, you think about all the great stories and movies that we watch. There's always a mentor figure there to kind of guide that character through his journey. The character's kind of reluctant to do it, and the mentor is there to kind of make sure they stick to it and let them know that this is what's required and you have it in you to persevere. And so I definitely see the importance of mentoring from that context. And then just one last point, I also see the difference between communities that, like one of the communities I work in, that the lack of mentoring has on the population of youth that come out and kind of we see these youth without having those mentors around them, and the consequences of mentors being absent as well. So I've seen them from both extremes, I would say.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because you see, I envisioned at one time point, and it's still something that's doable, but I envisioned mentoring becoming a way of life, and it has a place in the family, it has a place in the community, it has a place in the education organizations, the schools, the higher education, and all of that, and then it has a place in the workplace,
Mm,
and to have that so that it floats out. You start at sort of at A and you work your way all the way up to Z. From a mentoring perspective, it just has, there's so much power behind that, and a lot of places are not taking advantage of that, not at all.
absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Now, kind of, we shift towards your book, and you've been an author, a two-time author, I believe.
Yeah.
And as a person's working to become an author in a context, I'm curious to know what was the most difficult challenge you experienced when you were writing your first book?
The first book, yeah. It was to I was fortunate because I with my first book, I pulled a lot of my content came from my blogs, because I'd written blog article after blog article after blog article, and I pulled that data or that content together and was able to shape it into the form of a book. But the the one of the things that I found most difficult was to stay focused, and it was easy to not sit down and write, and it was easy to obviously go and do something else or say, well, I'll spend some time on that tomorrow, or I'll do it, and tomorrow would come and go, and then you'd go, well, what the heck, how come I didn't get any writing done? So for me, it was the discipline of setting aside and adhering to time slots in your calendar to actually set aside for writing. And then the second thing would be to make sure that you have people that know how to do proper editing, that you have people that can actually edit your book properly. I took advantage of friends, and they did a decent job, but it took us a lot longer to get to a final state where the book was ready to be published, just because it wasn't somebody that does that for a living and they know what to look for in that. I saw a complete difference between book one and book two.
Mm. Yeah, I think those are some very important lessons. I wrestle with, as you say, the day-to-day commitment of writing, and I always go back to one of my favorite movies. Is a quote from Rocky 3, and Apollo was training Rocky after he lost to Mr. T, and Rocky just doesn't have the eye of the tiger in him. And I remember him saying, "Well, I'll do it tomorrow." And I remember Apollo screaming, "There is no tomorrow," and
Yeah.
that quote always stays with me. So I play it in my mind when I tell myself I'm gonna do it tomorrow. That there is no tomorrow. Tomorrow is always gonna bring its own set of challenges and obstacles, and if you do that, then there would never be a book. So definitely thank you for sharing that. Now, kind of shifting back to your personal life, what would you say is one decision that you made that has been the most significant or most meaningful in your life?
It's a lot of people may find it interesting, but for me, it was marrying my wife Deborah, because
Mm,
she was my mentor, and she was always the one that held me accountable for making sure that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and that if I came home and I was somewhat perplexed about stuff that had happened throughout the course of my day, she was the one that said, "Let's talk about that." And she would sit me down, and we would have a meaningful dialogue, a meaningful conversation that um, I, I don't know. Well, I don't even want to think of where I wouldn't be or would be today if it hadn't been for that.
mm. You definitely understand and relate to that. Now, this next question is really going to be centered on in my business, I'm a connector. I'm a person that understands the importance of building relationships. I've developed methodologies and strategies for how to go about building connections. It's the difference between networking and connecting. And I'm always looking for certain characteristics. I had to come up with 8 characteristics that I look for when I make a new connection. And I'm curious to know from other people, do they have a similar process for determining whether or not either you're going to accept a connection request on LinkedIn or you're going to respond when someone makes a warm introduction? Are there certain characteristics you look for before you decide to really get present and engage or accept a connection request?
There are. I belong right now to a couple different platforms, I guess is the best way to describe them, that have resulted in me making some really super interesting connections. And what I'm looking for from those connections, and I guess even before we get to the point of saying yes, let's be connected, or no, let's not, is in some cases I'm going out on a limb because I'm looking for commitment. To me, it's a connection. It is a relationship, and for me, relationships are commitments that I need to make to somebody else, that I'm going to be present and be able to be there for them. So um, there's certainly that part. So when I go out on a limb sometimes because commitment to me is something I look for. Is if I'm going to invest in you, I'm hoping you'll conversely invest in me and in our relationship. So I'm kind of throwing caution to the wind, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And I'm saying, okay, let's see if we can make this work. The other thing and a lot of the things that I do is I did one here. I have a website or not a website, a Facebook page that deals with mental health. And I sometimes get these different requests to be part of the Facebook page. And so when I start to do my checking to sort of see whether or not I'm going to let this person into the group or not, I find that there's limited information that's made available. So right away, red flag. There's, some pictures that are not conducive to the whole mental health story. So that's another red flag. And when I look at sort of their circle of friends, that's like the one I had today it appears as though it's a lady who wants to join the group, but the picture is a male. So I'm going, I don't think so. We'll pass. So for me, it's a lot of, and I guess it's my ex police force experience, my 25 years in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, where I sort of know, or hope I do know, what to look for, and sort of go, okay, that's a little suspect, so I don't think we'll let them into the group, or that one looks okay, we'll let them in, but we'll monitor what they're doing, and if we have to, we'll punt them out of the group before they're in there for too long.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe definitely in today's time when the media can continuously perpetuate so much negativity out there, doom, gloom, issues, and some people just consume that and they bring that negative energy into them, and they try to bring that into your world as well. And that's why for me it's always important to try to weed out those individuals and avoid them. I said, like potholes, just navigate around those individuals as best possible. Um, Now, one of the things that I do as a business is I help conscious leaders identify and connect with strategic partners. I'm data driven. My background is system engineering, and I build systems. So everything I do is really data driven in that context. And I get data understanding about from my research on a particular client, and I'm always looking to try to understand who would be a good fit for this person as a strategic partner to help them kind of co-create to do greater things than they can do as an individual. So kind of with that context, who would you say would be a great strategic partner for you?
I at one time point when I was still in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I was meeting with business people quite frequently, and one of the things was, we're here to help. We can do, our solution is the solution that you need to have, and all that sort of stuff. And so I had actually developed a strategic partnership agreement that I would always kind of float in front of them to say, okay, read this over, and if you think you can live with this, then we can, start to develop our relationship from a strategic perspective. And it was very simple. It was, if I will invest in you as a strategic business partner, if you'll invest in me from the aspect of you'll understand my business, what my goals and objectives are, and you'll be able to tell me how your organization is going to help my organization grow, prosper, and become the best, how we're going to be able together to be able to support our clients in them being able to move forward. And it was interesting how many people, when they'd sit down with you and to have that conversation, would go, can I take this and go away and think about it? And as soon as they said that, I've usually said, you take as long as you want, because I just don't think it's going to work for us. If you've got to go away and think about this, then the connection isn't there. Or, the other thing is, I don't think I can live up to that. And so then it's okay, take my, little one sheet of paper back, and let's finish our coffee, and I'll walk you out of the building. And I stuck to that, and it worked great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually like that and see the value in that kind of a process. Now, I noticed you've accomplished quite a bit. Author, founder, company founder. You've also been a mentor. You've been married, a successful marriage. So of all the things you've accomplished in your life, what would you say has been the most rewarding?
I come back to my most rewarding experience was, and it was, I guess the best way to describe it was my wife's aunt and uncle. It was going through the photo album that they had. I was stationed in a northern part of Canada, and she ended up coming up there to stay with her aunt and uncle. And prior to that, they had a photo album out on the table one night when we were sitting there talking, and Deborah wasn't there yet. And so we were going through the album, and there was this picture of Deborah. And I said, well, who's that? And they said, well, that's our niece. And I said, well, get her up here. So, and that was the start. She came up, and our life together started almost as soon as I said, get her up here. We started our life together. And, if that's probably has been the most rewarding thing. And she knows, that's when she was still alive, she used to just kind of shake her head, because I always told the story of her being a photo album bride. And, it was truly I know it was the most rewarding experience that I had in my entire life.
I love that story. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. I can definitely relate to that as far as understanding the beauty of that. Now, you seem to be a very, I would say, positive person from the times we've interacted. And I would assume that as a mentor, you have to keep a certain positive energy with you if you're going to be working with mentees, and as well as a CEO of a company, the founder, people are looking at you for leadership in that context. So I'm curious to know, are there certain morning rituals that you kind of go through to kind of get yourself in that stance, or that state of mind, to be able to deal with all the negative energy and whatever the world's going to throw at you?
Well, and that's a good point that you've raised, is that to start the day, and before you even walk out the door to go wherever you have to go to do whatever you have to do, you need to be able to sort of clear all that negative energy out of your body, because the nature of the mentoring process is you're going to be taking more of that in each person that you meet with, or conceivably each person that you meet with. So for me, morning rituals are, I need my coffee in the morning. I need to have that cup of coffee. But what's also interesting is I've made a shift, and I've noticed a very distinct difference. And you actually touched on it already, where you talked about the news and that. I used to turn the TV on while I was having my cup of coffee. And it just, there was so much negativity going on in the world all over the place that every time you seemed to turn channels or whatever, there was always something negative. And so I've cut that completely out. I do not turn the TV on in the morning. I do not watch news. And sometimes I regret that because I like to stay in touch, but I don't turn the TV on, and I don't pick up on any of the news. And I will find out about that at supper time when I go to throw the TV on for half an hour. I'll do it then, but I've done that, and it's made a significant difference. And I also go through a process of reflection. And so I reflect on yesterday. So what went well, what didn't go well, and what will I do differently today as I go to move forward. And I also ask myself, as part of that process, is who do I need to connect with today? Including how or who do I need to connect with myself first before I leave the house and go about my daily business. So do I need to do that? And then who is it that I am going to have a connection with, some interaction with, and what might there be for challenges that we're going to encounter as we begin that journey together, that connection together. And if I can do that, I get myself in a better frame or place of, in a better frame of mood, I guess is the best way. And I'm able to move forward in a positive context. Because I also like to be able to think sometimes that there are some unfortunate individuals out there that are in a worse position compared to what I'm in. And we need to be able to sort of say, okay, what do we need to do to help that person grow personally and professionally? And that's all part of my reflection that I do every morning to sort of set myself up for a positive day.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So down to my two last questions, which I would say are my favorite questions because they really kind of give me a lot of data about the individual without it being without having to do all the deeper research, I would say. And so I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to set the context of what I mean by this. So the question is there a king connection that you would like to meet? And what I mean by that question is not a play on my name or my company. It's a title I've given to an individual who's reached a certain level of success, whether it's professional, personal, career-wise, that if I was to actually meet this individual and we were begin to co-create, we can make some great things happen. And so I'm not speaking as an individual because it could be a celebrity where I'm a fan and I would just want to admire them. It's more of here's what we can do together and here's what value I bring to the table because I've developed a set of processes and strategies for how to connect with those individuals. Like for me, mine would be Magic Johnson. As a developer in real estate, community builder, he's someone that I feel that I can definitely do great things despite his basketball success. It's really that part of him that I really want to be able to connect and build with. So now within that context, is there a king connection that you would like to meet?
Most definitely. And actually, thank you for clarifying that because I had two or three that I thought that would maybe fit the criteria, and I was not even close. So this helps. And so for me, the individual that would be my king connection would be Sir Richard Branson. And the reason for that is because I'm a volunteer mentor for his entrepreneur program in the Caribbean, and I have been a volunteer mentor for a number of years now, where I work with young entrepreneurs typically in the Jamaica area who are wanting to get their own business started, and so Richard provides, the structure and all of that, and has some of us as volunteer mentors working with those individuals. So it would definitely be Sir Richard Branson.
Great choice. Great choice. Now, my last question would be, what book would you say has been the most influential in your life? Or maybe a book you read in the last week or two that you would say has been influential that you would want to share with our listening audience as, here's a book you should read that can really have a huge impact on your life?
Well, I think I would obviously want to sort of say, well, get one of mine. That would be a good read. But there's actually a colleague of mine, Wayne Townsend, wrote a book called The Invisible Path: Reflections in Mentoring. And it's a very powerful, powerful book because he has a lot of lived experience that he shares. He tells stories throughout the book. And for me, storytelling is a huge factor when it comes for me to buy a book. I'm always looking to see, does the author, tell a story? And if so, how do they create that weaving process where they weave you on a journey through the book and all of that. So Wayne Townsend's book, The Invisible Path, does just that. It's a great read. And yeah, that would be the one. And I actually wrote I believed so much in the book, I wrote one of the testimonials on the back cover of the book. That and I don't do that for very many, but for Wayne, the book just spoke to me, and I felt compelled to actually write that piece.
So his book, as well as your books, can be purchased off Amazon?
Definitely, yes. Yeah. Off Amazon.com, Amazon.ca. Yeah.
Okay. And so thank you for investing the time and energy and being today's guest on today's podcast. I want to give you the opportunity to share any closing thoughts that you may have with our listening audience, as well as any contact information for those who might want to reach out and connect with you and learn more or build with you going forward.
So the one thought that I want to leave is that it's extremely important that you take care of, you nurture, and you help grow the connections that you have today and the connections you'll have tomorrow. That without those connections, you truly are somebody you're kind of like that ship that's wandering out in the ocean without any place to go or not knowing where to go. So make sure that your takeaway from here will be that those connections are important to take care of, to nurture and feed. And then from a contact perspective, you can reach me. You can take a look at the website, the www.TalentC, talent with the letter C on the end, .ca. You can reach me through LinkedIn. Just Google my name, Doug Lawrence, and you'll be able to, my profile should hopefully pop up. And then you can also reach me by email. You can send me a message if you want at doug.lawrence, LAWRENCE, at TalentC, so the word talent, letter C on the end, .ca, and I'd be more than delighted to answer your questions.
Well, Doug, thank you again for being a guest on King Connections podcast, for bringing such wisdom, authentic self, and helping to bring out the importance of mentoring in our discussion today. So I definitely appreciate that. And listening audience, thank you again for listening to another episode of King Connections. And until our next show, I want everybody to have a blessed and productive day. Thank you.